Hello and good evening, my friends at Kardec Radio. This is Luis Lima, and I'm here once again for our weekly program, Spiritism, a Closer Look, Evolution. And this is our program number 9. Thanks for participating with us. Thanks for watching. As always, we end our programs with what we call the Spirit Trivia, which is a question or usually a question about something that was discussed during the program. So I owe you the results of 2 Spirit Trivias. Yeah, that's right. So let's get to it. Let's take a look at what we have for these past couple of weeks. And let's look at the questions, the answers, and talk about this a little bit before we move ahead to tonight's program. Okay, so last week we had, 2 weeks ago, we had this question here. Spirit Francois Arago teaches that planetary disturbances can create, in a list of options here. So let's first of all, as you can see here on the last option, sorry, but I don't know who Francois Arago is. We explained that last week. He was an astronomer. He came to be actually France's prime minister in the late 1800s, but he was one of these very special spirits. Once he was discarnated, he brought a lot of messages, and one of them is in the book of Genesis, in the last chapter, as we discussed that week. So let's look at the options here. So first thing, influences over spiritual and material life. Yes, he does talk about that a lot on this message, on the last chapter of the Genesis. We went over a lot of details on this a couple of weeks ago, so yes, that's a yes. Need for understanding there is solidarity among all laws of nature. Yes, that's exactly the way he closes. He wraps up his communication beautifully, by the way. Number 3, cataclysms are not just accidents, but means of regeneration. Yes, that's true. He teaches about that as well, and he makes us see things under a different light. That's one of his teachings. That's why it's so interesting the way he puts everything in perspective. So yes, all of those A, B, and C are correct. And if you want to look further, like I said, this is in the book of Genesis in the last chapter. Okay? So that was our Spirit Trivia for 2 weeks ago. So now let's see what we had for last week. Here it is. Based on the Universal Trinity, which is God, Spirit, and Matter, where does the vital principle fall? Where does the vital principle come in place here with this thing? So let's look at the options. Number 1, it is an attribute of God. No, that's not. It's not one of the attributes of God. It doesn't have anything to do with the attributes of God. Number 2, it's an attribute of the Spirit. No, it's not. It's not an attribute of the Spirit. It's something different. Third option, it lies within the universal cosmic fluid. That's what it is. That is correct. That's the right answer. It lies within the universal cosmic fluid. The vital principle, you got to remember this, okay? If you look at the question itself, the universal trinity, so you have God above all things, then spirit and matter. Matter relates to 2 things, universal cosmic fluid and material principle. Everything else, apart from that, is intelligence, which is the intelligent principle or the spirit. So the vital principle is not something related to the intelligent principle. It is related to the material principle, the ability that matter has, not the ability, but the ins and outs of the material principle that will allow for the formation of life. Of course, you need an intelligent principle making that happen. It's the cause of making it happen, but the vital principle lies within the universal cosmic fluid. We had another option here, D. It is the bridge between the spiritual principle and the material principle. No. And we put on the last question here. I know this one, but I'm not telling. It's on the Spirit's book anyway. And yes, it is. The right answer is right in the middle here, C, and it is in the Spirit's book. If you go through a set of questions for the vital principle, I think they start on question 22. Yes, it's all in there. And it's a vital principle. It's something that we've been on this for quite I think 2 weeks already, working on this or discussing the issue, because yes, it's critical for understanding how the intelligent principle moves matter, how they operate and create life. That's why it's so important, and we decided to spend some good energy on it, some resources on it. Okay, so we covered this. By the way, vital principle, we're still going to come back to it. We're not done yet. There's more about it. We're going to talk a little bit today about it as well. Anyhow, let's go forward. So we saw until last week, we were studying number 4, which I called the Earth, how the planet, the formation of the planet and all of that. We spoke about a lot of different things. Today we're going to start talking about the kingdoms, as we know, mineral, plants, animals, and so and so. Okay, so we're going to start from the bottom in reference to the material principle, not material principle, I'm sorry, to the minerals, okay? The minerals is the base for everything. And as we know, the atom, for all purposes, we don't need to break the atom in subparticles for us spiritists, because it will not bring any gain for today. We will in the future. For today's study, considering that the atom is the smallest particle, is good enough. So the intelligent principle, the spiritual principle, if you don't remember, learns how to deal with the atoms. Okay, what is the atom? This is an interesting view of things. It's a balanced work based on energy, based on giving and receiving energy, thus generating stability and equilibrium. Until the early 20s, by the way, let me just say this, quick parenthesis here. 1918 is considered the beginning of quantum physics, okay, which is this thing about studying the subparticles of atoms and all of that. In 1918, we did not have a full understanding of what the atom was, its structure, how things happen. We were still able to, with the knowledge that was in place at the time, we were still able to open up a brand new avenue of studies, quantum mechanics, quantum physics, but we did not know how that was until later, okay? When we found out in the late 30s, 1930s, how this thing worked, we understood that the atom, in a very simple language, if you consider that there's a point of energy in the center, that's the nucleus, and some other energies floating around that, those are the electrons. And it works based on an exchange of energy. So that this nucleus gives energy to the electrons, but in turn, the electrons give energy to the nucleus. Can you imagine if the electron starts receiving energy from the nucleus, and one day you would say, oh, I want more and more, but I'm not going to give anything back. What happens to the atom? It would be destroyed. The structure falls apart. So societies based on that, groups based on that, families and relationships based on that will be destroyed by its nature, because that's not how things are supposed to be. Anyhow, so a group of atoms bonded together under certain conditions, form molecules which bonded together form minerals. And of all the minerals, the purest one is the diamond. All these minerals are, not all, but the one that we know of, they are all on this chemical, I would say, table, which is called the periodic table of elements. And the table designates what these atoms are. We understood a lot about them already. Of course, there's more on the way, but we were able to get to the point that we can have somewhere a list of all these things and how they work. So those are the minerals. So from here, what we have is what we call the mineral kingdom. There is no life here, no life, just mineral kingdom, okay? And we saw a couple of weeks ago that there is a transition to the next kingdom. There is a point where minerals get life infused in their structure. Those are called the crystalline virus. Okay, and for all purposes, we have a very simple definition. That's not our purpose to study the viruses themselves, but very simple definition or a concept, more likely, of the viruses. They consist of proteins and nucleic acids. That's interesting. They are unable to synthesize food of their own. They are parasites. They are inert outside cells. In order to be a living thing, they need to be inside intracellular structures. And they have the ability to duplicate themselves and replicate themselves. So this is what a virus is. There is no 100% agreement within science that viruses are living beings or minerals. There is not 100% of agreement. Some people in science believe the virus is a form of life. Some others do not, because of they are not fully living. It's not our purpose to even judge or go through this, but just as a reference, there is no such a thing as 100% agreement. Okay, so as of these viruses, a whole new kingdom is born. That's the plants kingdom. Okay, so we go from the very simple plant structure, cells and living cells, and so it gets more complicated, it gets more complex until we get all the way up to the most complex elements of the plants kingdom, and they are the carnivores plants, which we discussed already a couple of weeks ago. And these are, if you look at the definition of this, it's very interesting. They catch insects and animals, and look at this, through digestive enzymes, they extract food. Digestive enzymes. So here's a question: is it a plant, or it should we consider an animal, or what is it? It's half and half. It's just one of them. So this is a transition point that goes over to the next kingdom, which is the animal kingdom. And again, on the animal kingdom, we're going to find the simplest possible elements or unicellular elements, all the way to the most complex ones, all the way to transitioning to the next level up. The transition to the next level is something that we call the Anthropoid, which is, I don't know if I'm using the best vocabulary here, but they are more than the monkeys and apes, but less than fully humans like we are. They are the transition point between two kingdoms, the animal kingdom and the next kingdom, which is us, the humans, or hominals. If you go to the book On the Way to the Light by Spirit Emmanuel, he will say something very interesting that we're going to go through right now. And I'm just going to read the phrase, and then we're going to talk about it a little bit. He's talking about the anthropoids. Here goes. These anthropoids were the ancestors of both human beings and modern day apes, and were the common point in their evolution. Hence, the serological kinship between the body of modern humans and that of chimpanzees. Let's pay attention here a little bit. Let me ask you this. If I tell you, think about a monkey or an ape, just think about it for a couple of seconds, okay? And then I'm going to ask you back, what did you think about a living and moving ape or a living and moving monkey of some sort, making its things and scratching the head and moving their hands and head? Or did you think of a monkey dead with a body, its body just sitting there on the ground? Very likely you thought about a living monkey or a living ape, making all the noises and scratching heads and everything else, because that's usually what we think of. If you thought about the monkey that way, you included two things in here: the physical body of the monkey and the intelligent principle. Not just the physical body, but also the intelligent principle that animates the body. With this in mind, if we go back to the phrase here, the last part of Emmanuel's saying is, hence the serological kinship between the body of modern humans and that of chimpanzees. The body, not the whole monkey, because the whole monkey includes the intelligent principle. Just part of the monkey, if you will, if you understand what I'm saying, which is the physical part, the body, the physical body. So what happens is, when it was time to go over to the next level from the animals, which is humans, in the spirit world, that was where everything was being prepared, one body was selected to bring to life, or to allow for life, orchestrated by more intelligent beings, or an intelligent principle that was better than the one animating the monkeys and the apes. But the intelligent principle is not the same. Humans have a more developed intelligent principle called spirit than monkeys and apes. So the anthropoids are the transition for one kingdom to another. But just like Emmanuel says, if you think about the evolution, there's going to be a fork on the road. So from that fork, you have two avenues. One is it continues, monkeys and apes continues their life. They're still around today. And it opens a new avenue, which is the avenue for humans. A whole kingdom, the hominal, humans kingdom, is born there. So animals and hominals, humans, we started, okay? Monkeys and apes and us, we started on the same point, but we are not the story that we come from the monkeys. No, because coming from the monkey would include the monkey's intelligent principle. That's not it. What was used, the common point, the common ground, is the physical body. It's the genetics. So the body of the chimps or the apes were taken at the spirit world. The DNA was modified out of the approximately 25,000 genes. 300 of them were modified to allow for a more developed intelligent principle to take over. That is exactly how things were done. In the book of Genesis, Allan Kardec presents this particular table here that is not, he didn't compose this. This comes from science. It was given to him and to all of us by science, in which from the most simplest organisms to the most complex, which is us, uh, the overlap percent of the DNA or genetic. So E. coli, the bacteria that we see all the time on TV, 15% of that DNA is the same as ours. And then it goes down the list. You see worm, 40%, mouse, 75%, cow, 90%, chimp, 98.4%, another human being, 99.9%, and a human being, which is also a relative, 99.95%. That's a very interesting table. You see, this table alone, it shows evolution here. It shows that things are progressing. It shows things, moving in terms of progress. Things are getting more complex. If you look at an E. coli bacteria's cell structure today, it's very different than ours. But there was a lot of evolution to get to the point that we are today. So this particular slide here shows us the transitions for all these kingdoms, from between kingdoms. So there are 3 transition points, as you see here: crystalline viruses, carnivores plants, and the anthropoids. Now, one interesting thing, going back a little bit, okay? Remember, it all started with spiritual principle that graduated, if you will, became intelligent principle that again graduated even more further and became spirit. Where do these 3 names, spiritual principle, intelligent principle, and spirit, where do they fit in here? Well, this is how it goes. The spiritual principle, if you remember from our meeting number 1, virtual meeting number 1, it operates only inert matter. It's learning. The spiritual principle has its first contact with the material principle, the universal cosmic fluid. It's going to have to learn how to deal with the basic elements, the basic structure of matter. The spiritual principle will not be, it only operates inert matter. Then it graduates into intelligent principle, as we saw. The intelligent principle is present in 2 kingdoms: plants, vegetables, and animals. Plants and animals. That's the intelligent principle. When the intelligent principle becomes so intelligent that it graduates again, it graduated once here from spiritual principle to intelligent principle when it learned how to infuse life into inert matter. That's when the crystalline virus was born. The intelligent principle also graduated and became spirit. A spirit is present in the hominal kingdom. And there's a transition point from the intelligent principle that makes it become a spirit. And that's when the anthropoids were born. One interesting thing that we hear a lot is people saying like this: hey, listen, when I was a dog, or when I was a plant, when I was a mineral, well, let's understand one thing. We spoke about this. I'm going to rephrase it. When you say I, when you say me, when you say us, you're talking about a spirit that is an individualization of the intelligent principle. At the animals and plants level, there is no I, there is no me, there is no us. So, a question such as, when I was a plant, stop the question, because you're assuming something wrong. That has to be understood. The intelligent principle individualizes when it's ready for it, and then once it's individualized, it becomes a spirit. Then there is an I, then there is an us, and then there is, you and me, and so on and so on. So, in the beginning of our study, not that we're getting to the end, we're far from the end. So, by the way, please follow us in these upcoming weeks. There's a lot of interesting things coming. But in the very beginning, we spoke about this image. It's an image that became iconic within the studies, or even considering studying evolution. Okay, this shows the idea of the sketch is to show that there was some sort of evolution in the process. So what I did to this image, I attached the proposed. Okay, this is not set in stone. This is proposed by certain people within science, by certain groups within science. There's a general agreement about this, but it's still a proposed idea that, for example, if you look at the very first type on the left, the afarensis, the Australopithecus afarensis, they supposedly lived on Earth between 4 and 3 million years ago. And then the next one between 3 and 2 million years ago, and so on and so on. So until we get to the more modern men or humans. There's a transition, an interesting transition point here. If you look at the names of these guys, right, the 4 ones on the left carry a common name, Australopithecus, and the others on the right side carry a common name called Homo. Okay, so Homo habilis, Homo erectus, and so forth. So there was a time where these living beings were what we call non-Homo, and with evolution they became what today we call the Homos. So there is a transition point here, somewhere around 2 million years ago. Okay, there was a transition point. All these, on the very first one on the left, living 4 million years ago, right? There's a symbol for those. It became very famous a few decades ago when they were able to kind of reconstruct the structure of this individual and a face, and they put a human name on it to make it more friendly, and they call Lucy. So if you heard about Lucy, Lucy is one of these first living beings right at the Anthropoids level. Okay, and then this image shows several of them. The idea in this picture, behind the picture, is just to show a little bit of, how faces were changing. They were becoming less round and a little more. The dimensions on the outline are changing a little bit. That's the idea behind this picture here. So anyway, let's go back to close today's study. Let's go back to the idea of going from minerals, infusing life on minerals and life and the living beings. So how do we go from the mineral kingdom to the plants? We know now, okay, vital principle. Allan Kardec has a bunch of questions actually in the Spirit's book, a sequence of questions about the vital principle. Now, he was studying living beings, plants, and so and so and so, right? So the vital principle is what make inert matter that belongs to the mineral kingdom to be infused with life. So his question was, well, we have plants, we have the very primary or elementary forms of living beings in the animal kingdom. They're called zoophytes. Then we have all the animals in all diversity possible. We have the anthropoids, we just spoke about them, and then we have the humans. Okay, so Allan Kardec goes to the spirits. Look at the brilliance of this man, right? He asks the spirits, is the vital principle the same for all these, for the plants, for the animals, zoophytes, the anthropoids, and humans? Is it the same? What a great question, right? Okay, and here is the answer from the spirits. Yes, it is the same. And before I continue, because of everything that we studied so far, it would make sense if it all comes from the same universal cosmic fluid slash material principle. If it all comes from the same pot, if you will, it has to be the same. There's, it, Something is going to be different further down the road, but yes, it is the same. Answer from the spirits. Yes, but it is modified according to each species. Now I'm asking you, who modifies? The intelligent principle. The intelligent principle modifies it. And that's why we have more advanced living beings, less advanced living beings, and so on. So we have different kingdoms because it varies according to each species. And the spirits go even further, responding to Allan Kardec's question. It is this principle, the vital principle, that enables them to move and be active. Of course, if you take out the vital principle, you go back to the minerals. It also distinguishes them from inert matter, because the movement of matter per se is not life. Matter is moved by something, by someone. It does not produce movement by itself. This is very clear on question 66. Matter is moved. Intelligence, intelligent principle, whatever you want to call it, some form of intelligence manipulates the matter, moves the matter. Matter doesn't do it by itself. And that's an important concept here in Spiritism. Vital principle is something that is manipulated by intelligence. It doesn't happen by itself. There is no such a thing as an accident. Some form of life came about by accident. Nothing happens by accident. Well, thank you for joining us this week. Next week, we're going to continue from here. There's a lot of interesting things coming along, okay? We hope you're here next week with us. Don't forget, go to evolution.spirittrivia.com. Go there. You're going to see our question of the week, okay? And the question is going to be published there. You can go in and guess your answer. Once again, I always like to say and rephrase this when you get to the site. We do not ask for your name. We do not ask for you don't even have a box to put that in. We don't ask for a name, for email. We don't collect any information from you. No phone number, no IP address, nothing like this. So go ahead, feel free, participate with us, and guess your answer for this week's Spirit Trivia. If you're on a computer, you can use the QR code that you see on the top left of your screen. But please participate with us. And thanks for joining us this week. We will be here next week on Wednesday, Spiritism, a closer look, evolution on Kardec Radio. By the way, I wanted to say, I encourage you actually to go to KardecRadio.com. You can see our programming grid. We have a lot of interesting things. We have videos, podcasts, etc. And as always, I always like to make sure you understand this is all volunteer work, completely volunteer. We don't charge for anything. You don't pay for anything that you see here that you share with us. So donations are always welcome. You can donate whatever you think it's reasonable, whatever you can. Just go to KardecRadio.com. On the very first page, on the front page of our website, you're going to see an option to donate and participate with us. Thank you very much for tonight's participation, and I'll see you next week.